it's a story of a lot of perseverance and a lot of twists and turns, as I think most companies are. I think that's one of the things that I think a lot of folks looking in from the outside don't realize, that it does take a lot of twists and turns and changes to sort of get the product off the ground, to really find the market, etc. So we started in 2001, in August of 2001, so a long time ago. And I mean, this is back when the word cloud wasn't really a thing. I mean, yes, everybody had a Hotmail account, which was typically, which was in the cloud, but folks didn't really realize it. And for the most part, folks were still downloading software to their computers. So we had an idea, or a spark back then, that there's got to be a better way to monitor the information that matters to you. Now, what's different back then is that we applied it to a personal story. So I want to monitor my sports news, my financial news, my stocks. I want to monitor the weather, maybe the picture of the day, whatever it is. We approached it from a personal or a consumer type angle. And we had this application that we had built, and we published it, and it was basically a personal dashboard. It was a news aggregator, but personal dashboard. And we published it, and we had thousands of downloads every day. And people could build these little widgets that would monitor various different things. And we had an open API, and folks would be building these things. And it was massively, massively popular. So much so that I couldn't pay my hosting fees. I remember being on the phone with our ISP, begging them to say, can you keep us going? I don't have any revenue. We're a startup. And they did, which is another lesson in sort of entrepreneurship. Ask the question, empathize and get people to empathize with you, right? And I think it'll go a long way. And so we had this cool product that was getting lots of downloads, but we couldn't find a business or a sales model for it. And the idea was that we were going to sell to the publishers. So the Weather Network would have a channel down to the desktop, or the Sporting News would have a channel down to the desktop. But news publishers didn't have any money then. They still don't have any money now. Maybe it's even gotten worse. So we had this dilemma. We had this entrepreneurial dilemma where we had this massively popular app, and we were upwards of 300,000 users. Maybe not that much, maybe 250,000 users. We had tons and tons of users, but we couldn't break into a repeatable, scalable business model. So, and we were making ends meet by doing websites and doing odd programming jobs here and there. And again, I'm a big fan of that. I think it really is the best way to start a company. You've got to bootstrap. You've got to learn and respect cash flow and value that you can create and find a sale. So I'm a big fan of that. I mean, it was hard, and keep in mind there was no kids and no house and no marriage at the time, right? But those kind of things, they add to the hunger and the need to create something that has value. So we survived on sort of odd jobs and whatnot. And then it was, I think in 2004, Lufthansa, the German carrier, came along, and they said, hey, we really love your personal dashboard, and half of our staff in Germany are using it, monitoring their soccer scores. But can we use it to push business data to our employees, push metrics, and whatnot? And we had, we were looking at a little thin around the waist. So the answer was yes, of course you can use this to push business data. Why don't we come up with a price model and get you a quote tomorrow morning? So we worked throughout the night, and we came up with a model and pitched it to them, and they bought. And this was our first, and they bought. It was like $35,000 annually. And this was like a huge windfall for us. It was really the first time that a company had paid a significant amount of money to solve a real business problem using our product. So that was a real shift in the company's direction, and we started investing in more business functionality. We started investing in more visualization, and Lufthansa turned into Intel and Staples and American Express, and before we knew it, we had a whole bunch of what we would consider enterprise type customers that needed to have real-time data being displayed on the desktop. So that was great. It allowed us to grow. We still didn't have the growth metrics or the scale or the acceleration necessary to go out and raise a round of financing, but it was a step in the right direction. We had grown our headcount, we'd grown our engineering staff, and we were moving in the right direction. So all great. Now, it was a relatively difficult sale though still, and we were selling into IT. We were selling through procurement. We were working with legal. So it wasn't as effortless as we had thought. And we had grown to about 100 customers, maybe 125 customers. But there was still an element of it felt like we were pushing string. So yes, we were profitable, we had grown, but there was still something that wasn't quite there. It wasn't flying off the shelf. And I think that's another one of those entrepreneurial lessons, is that a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck in that middle ground where there's just enough success and hope to keep something going, but it's not enough to really say, well, let's double down and make this happen. So we're in this middle ground. It's good enough to say we're not going to kill it, but something's not quite right yet. So, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs get stuck in that middle ground where, they say, okay, well, we just got a sale this month, let's continue. But really there's something fundamentally wrong with the product or the business model. So, just fast forward, one of our customers in the UK was Aviva, the insurance company. And in 2010, they came to us and they said, hey, everybody's running around with their brand new iPads. So we'd like you to, consider the following things. Can you make your desktop application mobile, web-friendly? Can you make it more self-serve? Because we actually don't want to work with IT. And the third thing that they said was, can you make it less expensive? And, I sort of chuckle at that, but what they were really saying was, we want to have cost control over this. We don't want to work with procurement. We want to own this. The business wants to own this from an implementation, but also from a financial point of view. So make it easier, put it in the cloud, and make it less expensive. So we retooled, and we still had a business dashboard, a real-time business dashboard, but in 2012, we launched a less expensive, much easier and cloud-based application that in the first year attracted 350 customers. And here's the difference. That product felt like there was pull. And it's unmistakable. If you talk to an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of folks that come in the office and I'll chat with them a little bit, and there's two types. There's questions about how do you guys generate leads, how do you organize your sales force, how do you comp your sales force? That's one side. And then there's less often, but then there's the entrepreneur that comes in and says, Allan, I'm having difficulty with scale. I'm having difficulty with, how do we keep up and hire? That's a very different type of question. And it really is the difference between, are you pushing string or are you being pulled? So when you have product market fit, you feel it. There's a fundamentally different feeling that you get throughout the company and the way the company scales and asks questions that you don't get if you're still struggling with those questions. So we had this product that we launched in 2012, and it has now grown through 350, through 1,000. We did some financings, and we're close to 9,000 customers today. So again, it's really only been the past 4 or 5 years where we've seen some tremendous growth even though the company is 15 years old.
What is it about this product, Klipfolio, that gives it that pull, that gives it that demand?
So I think it's a good question. I think I mean it's difficult because we're right in the process right now of really understanding what is the medium to long term plan, product evolution of our products, moving forward. And we're going through a lot of soul searching and questions about, how do we design a product and an experience and journeys that will really fit the market and really have value and create that pull. I mean, when you're first starting a company, usually there's some sort of an itch or some sort of a hack that gets applied. I need to do it this way because there's nothing in the market that satisfies that current problem. And you sort of look for those things. And I think that's how we started. Even with our personal dashboard, we started by developing a product that we wanted to have that didn't exist anywhere. And you could argue that even though we weren't making any money, with our personal dashboard, we did find user value. We had 1,000 downloads a day. That's phenomenal. So there was something there that sparked interest and demand from a user's point of view. And I think if you extend that to the current product, we really focused on how do we make it very simple for somebody to see the value. How do we streamline the journey? How do we really focus on user quality and habit building and engagement? But then the other thing that is equally important, all the UX and user journey stuff is one side, but the other stuff that's equally important is you obviously have to go and find a market that is sufficiently large and that you can address, you can speak to, you can attract, through your messaging and through either virality or network effects, to your product. So I think you always need to think of those both sides. You need to make sure that there's something that has true, honest value that solves a problem. And I mean, that's an age-old statement. But then you also need to make sure that you marry that with a market that is addressable and large enough so that there can be scale and future growth as well. And I think for our current product, we're targeting small and mid-sized businesses, and we have a very inbound model that relies on search engine optimization and content marketing. I think we have hit a market that is absolutely massive, has a need, and we have a product that is priced right, is sufficiently easy to start and get off the ground with, and is supported. And when I say supported, not just using documentation and webinars, but is supported by our own belief that this is something that is truly important. Like truly every company should be monitoring their metrics if they want to grow and scale and be efficient. So I think there has to be an authenticity or a genuine core belief that your company is doing something and is backing something that is important.
So for me and my social media measurement and management students who are learning to become social media managers, the value proposition might be, here's a way to integrate data into a fairly simple dashboard. To others, is it a lot more than that?
It can be. So we have a big spectrum. We have folks that are monitoring their warehouse and their logistics. We have folks that have built some fairly sophisticated, almost intelligence into our dashboard where there's alerts and charts that will predict things or allow them to make corrections before certain things happen. But the vast majority of our customers are going from a 0 state to a 1 state. They're going from not monitoring their data, whatever that is, if that's sales data, finance data, social media data, to monitoring their data. And That's an infinite improvement, in how they control and how they move forward and how they make changes. So I mean, we're very much huge believers that everybody should be measuring the things that they do, and I think especially businesses today where data is really behind almost every single action. Monitoring your data is something that is easy and can be done. One of the things that is often sort of a higher level of meaningfulness is when you're able to combine the data. So there's a couple of scenarios. So one of the things that we solve is instead of having to go to Google Analytics and to Facebook and to LinkedIn and to QuickBooks and all these things, you can, because it's a dashboard, you can put all the things in a single pane, a single dashboard, and have your control center right there in front of you. So this is what we're looking at. Now I see everything and I can compare it. So it's a time saver. But the other thing that is perhaps more interesting is that a lot of our customers want to combine their data. So they want to have a ratio of what is my social media activity to last month's spend. So I need to take my data from Hootsuite or from Buffer and then marry that or create a calculation with my data from QuickBooks. So what was my program spend or my social media spend last month compared to whatever the relevant metric is for social media activity or engagements. So that's where things get really interesting. And some of our customers are combining 6 or 7 different data sources into a single metric. Things that, they really couldn't do easily, outside of having a dashboard like Klipfolio. So that ability to not only see everything in one screen, but then also to be able to mash up and calculate more meaningful metrics, I think is really important.
Would you say that one of the strengths then of this is its flexibility or its ability to be malleable to define?
Absolutely, and I mean that's a curse as well as it is a pro. So I mean we often joke that like there really is almost, and it is a curse as well, there almost is nothing that you can't do with Klipfolio. You can combine all sorts of really messy data from all sorts of different systems and come up with a beautiful dashboard. And it can have formulas that are multiple hundreds of lines long if you needed to cleanse the data and manipulate it that much. But that's also difficult. So for somebody to go to that level, and yes, you can do it in Klipfolio, you almost have to be a programmer. So how do we find that middle ground where we can have a solution for a marketing manager or a sales manager where they're able to combine data and do some fairly sophisticated, fairly easy things, but meaningful, without having to write, half a book of programming code. And I think so you're right. Klipfolio is definitely flexible, powerful. Those are the words that we hear. But sometimes that can also make it difficult.
You seem to emphasize support, online support, really helping people through the difficult spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of the things that I think we do very, very well. Again, like we're a small business ourselves, and our customers are overwhelmingly small and mid-sized businesses as well. So I think it is something that we can empathize with a lot. We really want to help to teach people how to do the things that they want to do. And I can tell you one thing, that even though there is a learning curve, the folks that do invest the time and have that aha moment of being able to pull in data and then create magical numbers with them are very, very loyal. And they almost get addicted to being able to work with and understand their data, because it's starting to tell them things about their business, things and ratios that they perhaps would have never been able to calculate on an ongoing basis or see in real time. So I do think and when we look at how we target customers as well and target users, you'll see on our website right now that we don't really make any excuses about the fact that you will have to invest time. I think we even use that as one of our messaging is, you will have to invest time in this, but you can do a lot. And we try to really encourage people to get into the editor. This is our building environment, because as soon as you do, you can do some amazing things. So I don't think you have to shy away. I think there's a misconception that when you market something, you almost always have to say it's easy. It's 1, 2, 3 steps and you're done. It doesn't have to be that way. I think you have to get the right users who have a pain, and if they're willing to put the time into it, they can be very successful and very, very loyal as well.
At the level of your company, what are some of the powerful data points that really give you new insights?
Sure. So one thing that we've just recently started monitoring is something that we call true trials. So this is a metric that we have defined ourselves. So if you look at the marketing funnel, you'll have website users, you'll have trial starts, and then if you're looking at fairly raw gradient, you'll have wins or conversions, and then customers, right? One of the things that we've noticed is that if we can get a trial user to come back even a second day, their probability of turning into a customer is something like 50%. So what can we do to encourage those first couple of minutes, those first couple of hours? So we've come up with a definition around true trial. A true trial is somebody who comes back after 1 day of using the application, and we're optimizing around that. And all of a sudden, now that we have this definition of this metric, true trial, we can start calculating all sorts of other things. What is our spend per true trial? What is our conversion rate per true trial? What is our engagement rate? What are the cohorts telling us? So it's almost infinite, but if you start having these discussions about meaningful numbers, you can start looking at them in a different light and organizing your company and the company's behavior around different things as well. For example, we were, before we had true trial, we were really looking at just the higher level number of trial starts. But if you just measure trial starts, and I say to my marketing manager, hey, listen, optimize for trial starts, well, they can do that, but you're going to get poor quality trial starts that may never turn into customers. So true trials is perhaps a more meaningful metric. So I can now say, okay, optimize for true trials, and there's an element of quality in that. So optimize for true trials for both volume and quality. And all of a sudden, that's a more meaningful behavior, a more meaningful goal that they can run towards. It just adds clarity to what folks have to do throughout the day. But you're right. There are a million metrics that are not meaningful, and they're sometimes difficult to identify. I have an informal rule where, I'll add almost any metric to my dashboard, but if I haven't looked at it, and if you just don't gravitate towards it, get rid of it, because it's probably not worth your time. You start gravitating towards the ones, and then you refine the ones that are truly meaningful, the ones that can truly give you a sense of where you should take action or not. So I think there's a natural way of doing that.
Particularly in large organizations, there's a lack of what I would call communication from the top, the C-suite, the CEOs, down through the various roles that people perform, in which they understand which data to be looking at and why, and how that relates to their job function.
Yeah, absolutely, and we see that as well. I do think that there's a trend away from that. I think younger or smaller companies are being much more transparent, not only in their metrics, but all levels of metrics, but also in their general communication of what's the strategy, good or bad results. So I think there's definitely a positive trend towards that, and the more you communicate and the more you're transparent, I think the more your employees can participate in finding out what is meaningful, what do I do with this metric, where should I make my next move, etc. The other thing that is often a problem, and especially with larger companies, is that they start with a list of 24 metrics that they have to put up on a dashboard, and there's no hierarchy. Each one is weighted the same, and before you know it, nobody's looking at this dashboard anymore. Much better if you can have 2 or 3 metrics on a dashboard, and they have to be frequently changing. If they're not frequently changing, people will also stop looking at them. What you want to do is you want to encourage that water cooler conversation. And we're big fans of putting the numbers up on dashboards and displaying them throughout the, or TVs and displaying them throughout the office. You want to have that habitual look at the dashboard, see that the number has changed, and encourage that water cooler conversation so that people get on the same path. And if you've done that, then what happens is the natural conversation turns into how can we improve that, or why did it go up, or why did it go down. So simple, frequently changing, and meaningful metrics, I think are much more valuable than trying to put the kitchen sink, or having metrics that are, and this happens more in big companies, having metrics that are either too high or too granular. So I definitely think involving the users and understanding what is meaningful to their day makes a big difference. But again, you should be brutally honest with what's on the dashboard, and if you're looking at it, great. If you're not, get rid of it. It's almost as simple as that. But maybe in big companies, you don't have that kind of authority, right? I think in small companies like we are, you can change things very easily, and you can adjust things and try things and test things.
Does the movement toward artificial intelligence and bots change the game in meaningful ways?
Yeah, absolutely. It really does, and I think there's going to be a lot of really exciting things happening. So think about one of the things that's happening a lot right now, and we're working on this as well, is the idea of ingesting and modeling data. So if we pull in social media data, then using machine learning or automated artificial intelligence, we can better understand and then model that data so that we can visualize it more easily. So we know that this is a date column, we know that this is a numbers column, we know that this is geo, and by the way, most of our customers seem to be visualizing it this way. So, I mean, that's a simple or a lower artificial intelligence example, but you can have things such as insights. We noticed that your revenue was down this month, but it seems to be correlated to the weather in your region or the political climate or whatever it is. So all of a sudden we can start drawing conclusions and almost make insights. We could say the companies that are growing more quickly tend to do these kind of things. If you did this as well, we could predict that your revenue would do this. So I think there's a lot of simple machine learning that we can apply to business intelligence that will be a great insight in teaching customers and then also helping them do the right thing for their business. And I think that's especially true for small and mid-sized companies. One of the most common things that we hear is a client or a new customer will come to us and they'll say, we don't feel like we have all this data, but we just don't feel like we're in control. Okay, but that's not a monitoring problem. That's an education problem. So can we apply machine learning or artificial intelligence to helping them knowing about their business? Can we help them understand what really is meaningful to their business, and then start monitoring those few things so that they can grow their business more quickly and more efficiently? So I think there's a lot of huge opportunities as far as AI and machine learning in the future.